Thanks for having me here for this presentation. I was supposed to be here a few months ago, and I was about as sick as I can remember being in a long while, so it's good to have this opportunity to talk about these things in person again. And the thing I'm going to be talking about today is broadly applicable, not just to user assistance, but I think technical communication in general. But it's specifically what it means to be people who love technical communication in a world where so much of what's being talked about and defined is through the two letters UX for user experience. And I'm not standing up here as somebody that has all the answers, but I feel like I've really experienced this current situation and tried to make sense of it for my own career. And so that's really that's what this is all about. If everybody's career is totally on track and everything's smoking along the way it is, then some of this may not seem as relevant. But in the area where I work, which is primarily in the Puget Sound area in Seattle and the things going on there, people that are involved in technical communication really need to think about redefining and rebranding themselves to be able to make their value known. And so that's really what this presentation is all about. Now my clicker is working here. And I think that also a point that I want to put out early on is that I still love doing the things that I've been doing for 30-some years now. And it's things that I think all of us share in terms of our love for being able to figure out ways to help people understand technical concepts. But I do feel like I've had to think about my role in the software development workplace differently than I did 20 years ago, than I did 10 years ago, even 5 years ago. And that continues to evolve. So that's really what brings me to this. I have the opportunity to meet a lot of people through my work, and I also do a lot of teaching. So I teach a certificate program at the University of Washington for new technical writers, and I try to bring a lot of this into the coursework. There's a lot of things that I've always considered to be a progressive use of our technical communication skills, including working with some of the things that you see on this slide, like user interface text and doing interactive tutorials and helpers and documentation, making sure I really understand my audience, working with video, and then of course foundation items like writing and document design. But more and more, as I've gone into new projects, I've found that a lot of the things that had been kind of the core area that technical communicators were called upon was starting to be absorbed by people with very different backgrounds. And it wasn't that the nature of the work was changing as much as the way that we think about how to present our skills and move forward is the big change. And so among a lot of my technical communication colleagues, even the ones doing the most progressive work, suddenly these things were disappearing, and the technical writer is a very lonely person, and I don't think it needs to be that way. But I do know that I see every day that I'll be working with a team, and the people in that team will have no idea what technical communication is. They know all the things that were on that screen, but they think about it differently. And so, pivot is really what I think is needed here for our profession. And, hopefully, people start to figure out ways to articulate their own vision for these types of things that we do. So everything that I have on this list I continue to feel are extremely important. I value them highly. I still work with all of these things in a regular basis. But my point number one is I feel like I've had to rebrand my skills, really looking at the vocabulary that other people are using in the workplace and figure out what that means, because I found that those labels are important. And so, for example, interaction design. A core part of that is understanding your audience and figuring out how to put information directly into the software user interface. Things that I've been involved with for most of my career, things that I think a lot of technical communicators are involved with. But interaction design is a job category for the user experience arena. Similarly, the label content strategy. Content strategy, if you look at it, is something that technical communicators, good technical communicators, have been involved with for decades. We never really called it that very broadly, but content strategy is a huge label now. There are people that are making great careers as content strategists. Does that label really matter? In terms of actually doing the work, I don't think it does. In terms of making yourself visible, who believe that that content strategy is relevant, contemporary, and important, I think it does make a difference. Usability testing, that's more of a skill area that I think it would be better if more technical communication people were involved with, but that's also a key area. Thinking about our background work in terms of user research and using that term research, I think, is something that resonates. And another term, visual design. Most of us work with images. Some of us are better at rendering images than others. Some of us use tools. Some of us will use people that are highly skilled and talented in that area. But again, visual design is another label that's worth adding to our repertoire. And so this first point is just thinking about how to be able to rebrand what we do. Take a look at these word clouds, and you can find word clouds everywhere now, but these are word clouds related to some user experience sites. And I won't go through all of that, but just kind of absorb what's there, kind of look at the big things that are expressed. See, some of it, if you look at it, you see things like empathy, simplicity. Now, go to one that's an example from the UA16 Europe conference, which is people involved in technical communication. Great conference, great speakers, really informative information, and a lot of things that are similar to what's talked about at UX conferences, but if you look at the word cloud, like, it's very different. You have that content word there, but it's a lot more showing up in labels of tools and processes, as opposed to the UX side, where you get things that are more about emotion and art and that type of thing. So continue to be attentive to labels. One of the things I've tried to do myself in rebranding myself, for whatever it's worth, is actually figuring out what my own personal statement is. So this was something that I put together about 6 or 7 years ago when I wanted to start rethinking what it meant to be a part of user experience. And so I said, the UX of a robust product is enhanced through comprehensive user assistance. That includes these types of things that are so common to us. This isn't even relevant to me anymore when I work with clients. Essentially, all of these terms that I have there, like, people are like, what's help? We don't use that. We've never used that. Wizards, what's that? FAQs, yeah, we have that, but that's like a, that's like a marketing thing. It's not really core. Yeah, we do videos, but what do you do with videos? And so, right now I'm thinking about, better ways to be able to present the types of things that I'm good at, just so that people are aware of that. All right, so that first one was just about rebranding. Second is actually acquiring new skills. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but I think these are areas that most of us in technical communication can look at and say, yeah, I'm aware of those, but I'm not sure that I consider myself to be really knowledgeable or big expert in these areas. Of course, many of you, may be really, really good at these different areas. But just things like interaction design, getting away from passive presentations of information is key. Just the idea of anything we do being engaging, interesting, artistic in the way that that people thought about bringing art at the turn of the century, Art Nouveau, getting beautiful into everyday things. And that's how a lot of UX people think about things, even if it's something like documentation. How do we make that fun, interesting? A lot more attention to psychology, understanding things that have been learned from behavioral studies that show what people are interested in, how they're going to react to things. And more and more, I found that people doing things I used to do are graduates of UX certificate programs as opposed to the kind of certificate program that I teach in. So to me, that means I want to adjust my own curriculum that I teach at the university. And then there's like terms like innovative, ideating, and creating delight. I never use those terms, but that that's part of it is just understanding what the way that people within UX are talking about things and how they want to work with things. This slide is kind of interesting. It's from a skills survey from the Information Architecture Institute. And in this particular skills survey, this is information architects looking at the things that they spend most of their time on. And I won't go through all the detail here, but there is a technical writing item, and it's pretty far down on the list for Information Architecture Institute. IAI is, the people there have a lot of very close attributes to the type of things that people involved in STC should have. And so I think something like this is useful to look at. And wireframing. I also think it's interesting down here. It says, many thanks to Ricky for data visualization assistance. I would have called it a chart, but it's data visualization. And, so just little things like that I'm always trying to pay attention to. Here's a curriculum, a very recent curriculum for at Northwestern School of Professional Studies, Information Design and Strategy. I'm not going to go through all of these items. You can look at those on the slides later. This is a curriculum that 15 years ago probably would have been something like a technical writing, technical communication curriculum. And it would have looked like a lot of traditional technical communication courses. But as you look at this one, you'll find that it's very different. those differences in some ways may be significantly different. Like, for example, there is an elective class on persuasion. The whole course is about persuasion. So I don't think that's ever been in a technical communication curriculum, but a lot of the other ones, I think there would be some analog. Maybe. I think persuasion's important, but there's a whole course dedicated to that. The department that I taught at for many years was a Department of Technical Communication at the University of Washington in the College of Engineering. And about 8 years ago, the whole department pivoted, and it's now called Human-Centered Design and Engineering. In that department, however, technical communication has really fallen away, and so you can't even find good information on these types of topics that many of us grew up with as foundation skills. I think that's unfortunate, but the HCDE department has become very powerful. They have plenty of students. Everybody wants to get into it. It's a hot topic. But again, you look at a lot of the things that the graduates are doing on a day-by-day basis, and it mimics a lot of the things that everybody in this room is very good at as well. Some of the things, some of the aspects of, yeah, question? What's causing the rebrand? Yeah, that's a good question to reflect on. I think anything, all things in society are always evolving and changing, and influencers will start to get traction, and then that becomes a new way that people look at things. Fashion's always changing. Are the clothes today better than the clothes 5 years ago? No, they're. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't have a good answer for you on that. But all I see is that there's all these signs that there is a different vocabulary involved. Like this slide here. This kind of gets beyond labels and gets into some key dynamics in organizations that I've found that UXers are much better at than traditional technical communicators. One of those being that if there's a big problem that needs to be solved, you workshop it. Just about everything gets workshopped, and it's that you bring together all the people that are in any way important to this issue. Everybody gets together. You start getting Post-its all over the walls. It's a wide-ranging discussion. And those might take place over a day, a weekend, or it might be a week or 2 weeks in some type of agile sprint. But the point is that things are getting workshopped, and people aren't staying in their silos, in their cubicles. It's a much more collaborative situation. Use cases are always critical. So I know in my years of developing user assistance, I always wanted to be able to have really good use cases for all the things that I was developing, but I wasn't necessarily always able to get the budget that I felt I needed to be able to do that. But now, before any projects are started on the UX side, there has to be a very definable use case that maps to the objectives of the organization. So it's no longer just the documentation department deciding how they're going to put something together. It has to then match up to metrics about where the company is trying to go strategically, which gets to this last point about getting buy-in from C-level stakeholders. Almost all the really successful UX people that have come into my sphere are very clear about making sure that they want their information to be visible to people at the highest levels of an organization's hierarchical structure. And ideally, be able to have a top-down buy-in for the types of work that they're doing. So all those things on those earlier slides, the idea is that first you get the CIO, CEO to buy in that those things are relevant, and then that cascades down so that when you want to budget for something, it's like, oh, well, of course, because the CEO has mentioned this several times in messages to our audience, to our employees. That rarely happened in my years within the technical communication industry. And it's not that it couldn't happen, it's just culturally it didn't. All right, so that was things that I think we all need to work on, was that second point. The third point is to go on the offensive, which I have as it's my bottom point, that sometimes this may not be enough, but it's that we do have to go and make an attempt to recapture the things that are in our wheelhouse, that ideally we would like the people in this room to make sure that we have the jobs doing the types of things that were on those previous bullet lists. And it's really helpful to understand how people that have come into, for example, the software industry from a user experience background think about user assistance and more broadly technical communication. And it's not a really pretty picture. So if you talk about documentation on the consumer side, they really don't think it should exist. There's this whole idea that unless everything is intuitively obvious in the user interface, if everything was done properly, then there's not a need for the type of information that many of us spend a long time designing and putting together for our customers. And that's a very widespread opinion. It's a little less so on the enterprise side because complexity breeds complexity, and there are a lot of things in the enterprise that we do that are valued, but even that's changing. And so it's really important that anything that we're doing for user assistance is tightly integrated with the application, so that having repositories of information that aren't tightly tied to the context of people needing that information is less interesting from a UX perspective. That means in software, getting into the user interface. A lot of people in UX still think about the documentation as very uninteresting. And so that's something that really needs to be confronted head on. These first links that I have here are web posts that essentially are talking about how user assistance information is not helpful and actually a detriment in terms of mobile apps. And I wrote kind of a long article talking about how there are flaws in that thinking, because sometimes it's easy to say everything should be intuitively obvious. In practice, that rarely works out to be the case. But the point is, I wanted to stand up for the things that I thought people with a technical communication background were doing well, and that it is relevant to consider how to put together effective, helpful information, even if it's in a small screen mobile app. Getting back to this idea about how UXers think about, well, and everybody else, here we have a chart. So we have the UXers, they have their role, and then they interact with programmers. And so there's a lot of interaction there, collaboration, and then they might work with everybody else. Wait a second, no, this isn't right at all. the whole diagram is off. This is how UXers think about things. UXers think that UX is it all, and that everything is a subset of that. And, you know, philosophically, you could have some beers, drink some Ruditis wine, and I could see, you know, where that might be relevant. You might agree with that point or not, but the point is that UXers really have this mindset. And then programmers and everyone else, which includes people that are doing user assistance, is just part of that sphere. So whether you believe that or not, you need to realize that a lot of UXers believe that, and figure out what your own strategy is for being able to combat that, or work with it, or adjust it, or change it. It's just my experience, it is. And if we talk specifically about technical communication, it's an expense. It's part of the overhead. It's something that can get cut early on if there's budgetary problems. It's only vaguely relevant to meeting the organization's strategy that technical communication means people that are just focused on grammar and those types of activities. And it's kind of a dark picture, whereas you move to UX and it's all about revenue. It's about the user experience contributing to the bottom line. It's that it's going to drive sales. It's UXers talking to the C-level executives that what they're doing can be proven to be beneficial to the bottom line. And then it does. By the way, on that last slide, how many people noticed the spelling error? Anybody? Hey, everybody's evolving. It's right there. Thought maybe I'd have somebody notice it. Nobody. A little spelling. Yeah, it's too small. You're right. Yes.
Does that mean that every technical writer should morph or change their career into the UX field?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't make a broad pronouncement about anything. I mean, you know, Society for Technical Communication is still strong, and I teach in a program at the UW that's a certificate in technical writing, and so I think that still is relevant. What I'm saying is that you should be thinking more about the attributes that you bring to your position, the things, the skills that you have that can be valued when different labels may be needed to apply to it. And to consider that as just a way of ensuring that everybody understands your relevance when that vocabulary is changing. And so we could go right back to that first slide where I talked about all those things that I thought are important to me in my career, and I still do them every day. But I'm just trying to figure out how to make it all work in the way that... Now this area, though, I have to say, wasn't traditionally part of technical communicators. We were an expense. We were this slide. And in many organizations, TechComm is still this slide. And this slide is the one that brings budget. This slide is the one why there are hundreds and hundreds of conferences about all kinds of variants of user experience. And people have the budget to go to those events. And less so with technical communication specific activities. Some of that is, again, looking at the word bubbles, maybe looking at the Marcom speak, you know, what it means to present that value about our career. And again, getting into the user interface is a big part of that. There's this thing called a product narrative, which the people that seem to be really thriving like are locked into whatever the product narrative is. And this is, again, something that comes from that C-level in organizations. But it's that any project that you're talking about that you want to get funding for, you want to make sure it matches up to what all those people with the keys to the funding think is important to the organization. And that may not be the same thing that you're thinking of in terms of, oh, I need to get budget for my content management system. Okay. Does a C-level executive know what that is? Have they ever talked about a content management system in meetings with the employees? They've probably talked about things related to that, like we want to have an excellent sharing of information throughout our organization, that we want our high-valued content to immediately be available to anybody that needs it, whether they're a customer, a support personnel, salespeople. So that puts it in that revenue stream as opposed to the expense side. Some of the other things that go along with that, so metrics are a big part of that. TechComm people have actually been talking about that for a long time, but very few of us still have good metrics about how what we do ultimately benefits whatever those strategic goals are for the company. So probably for about 8 years now, I've been really strong about making sure that I do usability testing in all of the documentation work that I do. Actually testing to see whether the things that I've written and put together have a measured impact. And you know, most of the time I find out that my first iteration doesn't. And then I look back on the first 20-some years of my career and I'm like, how much crap did I send out there without testing it, and I have no idea whether any of it was useful to anybody. And that's a cultural thing that I think our profession really has to come around to. The idea that we should all want to test our work with users and find out what they really think about it. Well, that's just cultural. It's that, well, even how many people work on the software side in organizations? So about half of us. On the software side, there's very little software anymore that's successful that doesn't have testing. But then in those same companies, you ask how much of the documentation is tested at the same level, and it like goes down to this small percentage. And so to me, then that just means that we're not demanding the same level that we expect from others. But there's a potentially negative side to that, which is if you're going to commit to testing your documentation, then you have to commit to failing. Because I guarantee you're going to do something and you're going to test it and it's like, this didn't work. There are huge flaws in this plan. Nobody likes it. Nobody learns from it, at least to the level that we thought. And I talked about these other aspects, customer-centered and the marketing goals. This last one, this is just like kind of more on the humorous personal side, but be one with the millennial. UX is, people are just flocking into the UX area, and I'm old, so I can't be young anymore, so I have to be young in the way that I act. And, so I try to do that, but I'm 57. I'm not ready to retire yet, but every single room I walk into, I'm the oldest person in the room, and I need, why should somebody listen to me or consider my ideas if I'm not trying to be relevant to everybody else in the room? So that part I think we can all do. And then, I don't know, update your wardrobe. I mean, come on. There's only so much I can do, But you know, I think about it. I'm not very good at it, but at least I think about it. What do I have after that? Get a few visible tattoos. Make sure you spell them right. Drink craft beer, right? Got that going. Drink some craft beer. So just a little bit more, maybe more specifically, I mean, I'm not going to be a person with the bow tie, and you know, I think of myself differently than people that are 25, 30 years old. But some of the things that I think are millennial strengths, I think I locked down on some of them. Always connected to the internet, check for me. Master of social media, I don't know if I'm a master, but I'm not afraid of it. I get every app. I try every app. I have more apps than my kids, and I introduce them to things, and I don't use all of them, but I want to know about all of them. And I'm a pretty confident person. I'm a little slack in this area, so expecting recognition, I don't know. I grew up like in this, like, do your job, and then if you did your job, then it's good because you were supposed to do your job, and so you're getting paid to do your job, and it's a little bit, you know, a richer experience is expected, and so, you know, it's just always being, you know, aware of everybody's contributions. Compassionate, that's another one. I got to work on that one. It's like, something's not done. I'm like, why isn't it done? And it's like, try to avoid confrontational because that's a big issue. Team-oriented, that's tough for me as well. I've been an independent contractor for 28 years. It's hard for me to, like, I have really ideas about how I like to do things, and I can't, you know, I can't work that way with a lot of the projects I'm involved with. It has to be that very distributive, let's do a workshop kind of situation. So the millennial part is kind of on the personal side. And then on the social media, I play with everything, like I said. And some things, like, they're here, and then it's like, didn't I just learn about Vine? It's like, no, Vine's gone now. You know, it's been legacied. It's gone. Can't use that anymore. But, you know, Periscope, I watched, from Seattle, I watched most of what was going on in the final World Series game through Periscope. I mean, I had it on TV, but Periscope let me see it from people's seats and from the people outside in the parking lot who had Periscope and were showing their phone around. And, you know, so I'm locked into it. And I don't know if I'm going to use that in work, but I want to be thinking about it, and Facebook Live and that type of thing. So my main point is pivot, the rebranding of your skills, acquiring new skills. That's really where there's a lot of work. Going on the offensive is just taking charge and pride in the things that we know that we are good at, and making sure that other people are aware of it, and understanding a little bit about the younger people in the room, and wanting to be able to contribute as a team member in that situation. So that brings me to the end of my talk. You know, I can mention a few things which you'll have in my slides. Is my email address. Also, I put on a UX conference that is actually produced by Blink, and I'm the program manager. That comes up in Seattle every year, and so we're coming up with some great speakers the end of February and the first 2 days of March, so you might want to check that out if you're at all interested. And I could get you a smoking discount. Also, I have a user assistance event coming up at the end of March in Portland, which is a fun place. We might do something on the East Coast late in the year. Also a TechComm conference, our second annual at the University of Washington, Tacoma, will be in September. And if you're interested in my book on user assistance for mobile apps, you can find it there. And I do consulting, contracting, all that kind of stuff. So that brings me to the end of my talk. I hope you get some good information about it. How we doing on time? You want to let people go and we can do questions, or how do you want to do it?